Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague from Rhode Island, Senator Reid, Senator Elizabeth Warren, our new colleague from Massachusetts, and Senator Reid have started this effort, but we are welcoming ideas and supporters from both sides of the aisle to join us. The conversation tonight on the floor of the United States Senate may be the most important conversation that millions of American families could hear, because we're talking about student debt. Student debt in this country has reached the breaking point. It's reached the point where the cover of Time magazine would have a question mark. It shows a student headed off to college, and the question mark is it worth it? It has reached the point that the cost of higher education is so high, the indebtedness associated with it so high, that many are stepping back now to ask that very basic question. Is it worth it to go this deeply in debt for college courses, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or more? That question would have been unthinkable in my day. Unthinkable. If there was one driving idea in my mind from my mother and father, it was stay in school, go to college, do the best you can, and don't quit. Keep working at it. And thank goodness for me, the Soviet Union decided to launch Sputnik. That was the biggest break I ever got in my life, and I didn't even realize it. It was October of 1957. They launched this basketball-sized satellite that circled the globe. We didn't have any rockets or satellites at the time. And this satellite, as it circled the globe, let off this beep and signaled that it was out there. You couldn't hear that beep on the Earth with ordinary powers of individuals. Some scientists could pick up that signal, but they heard that beep on the floor of the United States Senate. You know what happened? Members of the Senate here, Democrats and Republicans, scared to death. We knew Russia had the bomb, and now they had satellites. We did a lot of things. We started preparing our Department of Defense. Get ready. Something may be coming our way. And then something happened which was nothing short of amazing. Somebody said, if we're going to beat the Russians, if we're going to beat the Soviets, we're going to need an awful lot of educated people. And they came up with an idea. It was the first time in history that the federal government had ever conceived of an idea of loaning money to college students to go to school, unless you were a veteran with the GI Bill. You didn't have to be a veteran. They would loan money to students to go to college and call it the National Defense Education Act. Sounds right, doesn't it? If we're going to defend America, we need education. So we will loan money to students all across America to go to college. And what it did was completely destroy the stereotypes of colleges and universities, which used to be for the very, very brightest and the sons and daughters of graduates. Then in the 1960s, after the National Defense Education Act, higher education was democratized, and a young high school student from East St. Louis, Illinois, walked into the admissions office at Georgetown University and went to school with a National Defense Education Act loan from my federal government. I didn't borrow much money because it didn't cost much money. Seemed like a lot at the time. And the deal was you borrowed it, and then in the 10 years after you graduated, you got 1 year grace period. In the 10 years, you paid it off in 10 installments with 3% interest, which I did. Borrowed money for college and law school. Did I know whether that was a good idea to go in debt for college? I didn't. Other than the fact that I'd been told over and over and over again, the best thing you can do with your life is to go to college. Fast forward 50 years. Fast forward from that experience in my youth to today. Now imagine that same student with the same motivation for college is sitting in that admissions office, and instead of being told that they may have to borrow $500 or $1,000, they are told they may have to borrow $20,000 to go to school 1 year. Now imagine you're 19 years old making a decision about $20,000 in debt. How in the world could you make that decision? You're still motivated. You want that college education. And you basically say, I'll sign up. The admissions officer just told you classes start next week. If you sign these papers, you'll be in there. If you don't sign the papers, you won't be. Students are signing up. And now, all across America, the indebtedness that these students and many times their parents are incurring is building up to record levels. More student loan debt in America than credit card debt in America. And tragic stories that are emerging from it. Stories of students deeply in debt, dropping out of school with no degree. Stories of students deeply in debt, finishing school, unable to find a job. Stories of students deeply in debt, going to semi-worthless for-profit schools with diplomas not worth the paper they're written on. And what happens at the end of the day? The debt of these students is not like any other debt. Luckily, we have, as my colleague in the Senate, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who once taught the bankruptcy course at Harvard Law School, and she can help correct me if I'm wrong, at least fill in some blanks for me here. Currently, if you declared bankruptcy in America today, there are some debts that you cannot discharge. I'm going to try to remember a few of them. She can help me with the others. You cannot discharge taxes owed to the government. You still have to pay that. You cannot discharge money that you owe for alimony and child support, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I don't know if there's another category, but I'm going to add student loans here. I would yield to my colleague with the permission of the chair. Did I get an A on that, or at least a B?
You got an A.
All right. So the fourth category is student loans. If you end up in debt with a student loan, it is one of the few loans in your life that you can't discharge in bankruptcy. The money you borrowed for your home, yes, that's dischargeable. The money you borrowed for your car, yes, that's dischargeable. The money you borrowed for a boat, yes, that's dischargeable. The credit line that you have just for your ordinary expenses, yes, that's dischargeable. But when it comes down to student loans, it's a debt you carry to the grave. You either pay it or they will hound you for as long as you live. That's why it's different than other debts. And that's why we came together and said it is time for us to look at these student loans, the amount of debt which students and families are carrying, and do something about it. 3 bills emerged from this. The first bill I call the Student Borrower Bill of Rights. And it says when you sit down at that desk at the admissions office, they've got to tell you what your rights are. They've got to tell you that the government loan that you could use to pay for your education has a lower interest rate, more reasonable terms, can be consolidated at a later point in your life, a limitation on how much money out of pocket you're going to have to pay based on your income, and you might have some forgiveness if you go into some areas like teaching and nursing. You've got to be told this. Right now, students sitting across from that admissions officer are being steered into the most expensive, worst loans. So the bill that I've offered, Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights, says, first, tell them the truth, tell them the best circumstances for them to borrow money if they need to borrow it. Secondly, Jack Reed of Rhode Island. His bill basically says that university has a vested interest in making sure that you don't borrow too darn much money, that you don't get so deeply in debt you can never pay it back. That university, if they don't accept that responsibility, could be on the line themselves for some of that debt. Think they'll take it a little more seriously? You bet they will. That's the Reed bill, which I'm co-sponsoring. And the third bill, I would like to defer with the permission of the chair to the senator from Massachusetts, is the one that I think is really a critical element in this approach to dealing with student loans and student debt. And if, through the permission of the chair, I would like to enter into a dialogue with the senator from Massachusetts.
Without objection.
And I'd like to, at this point, yield to the senator from Massachusetts to describe, if you will, for the record, your refinancing proposal.
So